Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Tim on another episode of Dr. Tim and a priest walk into a podcast. We have a priest today and a reverend today preacher today who is here, who is not our typical guest of Dr. Ted Cassidy from the Catholic Church, but instead today from Resurrection Lutheran Church here in Madison, Indiana. Very special, extraordinary story that Rich has around being a maximum security prisoner for a long time, but more so, he is serving our local community, and we're here to talk about that. So very excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for everything you do for the community. Tell us about what the Resurrection Lutheran Church is. Tell us about the people of Madison. Tell us what was called you to be here in Indiana.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Resurrection Lutheran Church is a small church. You can actually see it in the background, which is a water painting of the church up on top of the hill, as folks in Madison or Hanover say, off Clifty Drive. And we're a small Lutheran congregation in the ELCA, or Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Founded back in 1965. So in my time interviewing with that congregation and looking at another opportunity closer to home, as I live in the Louisville area, Louisville, Kentucky, I started falling in love with the people and a core group of people who has had a heart to welcome all people. And over time, a couple months of interviewing, I felt called to go there. I thought I could serve people faithfully. So I'm glad to be there here at about 3-year mark.
Nice. For 3 years in Madison, Indiana. How big is this parish, this church, this congregation? And excuse me if I use the wrong language. There is a lot of crossover with yours. But even your PR.rich is different than my FR.rich in the Catholic faith. So yeah, please make sure that you hold me accountable to the right words here. But how big is this congregation? Who's there? What kind of people walk through your doors?
Yeah, so we have about 100 members, and maybe have about 30, 40 people on an average Sunday morning. We have an interesting representation of folks connected with Hanover College, and folks who've lived in the community their whole lives. So again, it's kind of small church that's pretty typical of in terms of size and assets for probably the state of Indiana and the Ohio River Valley geography in general.
Got it.
I think probably what I've been told by some community members is that we're unique in a emphasis of welcoming everyone. And I say this typically every Sunday at communion. In the Lutheran tradition, we have communion almost every Sunday, and that all folks are welcome to communion. There's not a litmus test for that, because the table there that we celebrate, it doesn't belong to a Lutheran church, right? In our theology, it doesn't belong to, actually belongs to, in our faith, Christ. And I'll often say, if the arms of Christ are open on the cross, why would they be closed now?
I love that. Yeah, and you said something interesting there. Almost every Sunday. There are some Sundays that you don't give communion. Is that just from being closed for the summer kind of thing, or is there some tradition there?
No, not really. Sometimes the Sunday after Christmas will be a Christmas carol sing, where we just do some readings and singing. That would be the only Sunday we may not have communion. We do have to have an ordained person there to preside at Eucharist. So that's very similar to our Roman Catholic siblings.
Got it. And I've been to Lutheran Church before, growing up, actually, because I had a lot of cross kind of denominational celebrations when the church I grew up with, and was invited to have partake in having Eucharist. And so that's different than the Catholic Church, in which we ask not to necessarily not to take the bread and wine, which we believe is the body and blood. And so, what is the difference there? I love that, actually. It's so welcoming and so wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we believe in the real presence of Christ in the bread and the wine. And I will, goodness, I don't want to bore the audience or you with, or even myself with a Luther's idea of sacrament. But generally speaking, we believe that there's a tangible element, water and baptism, bread and wine in communion or Eucharist, and that and a promise from God that we have a tangible way of experiencing God's grace coming from outside of us and to us in the celebration of these things. So I really like the traditional Roman Catholic terminology that this is a mystery, which is really the Greek word for sacrament. We use the English word sacrament, which comes from the Latin, but I like the connection between the idea of mystery. Here's an example. I give communion to children if the parents are willing, and we do first communion classes. And I had a person ask me once in my first congregation, why do you give communion to children? They don't understand it. And I said, can you introduce me to an adult who fully understands it?
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and we have to eat as human beings to live. So, give us this day our daily bread, and to borrow from the Lord's Prayer, right? So in some ways, there's a depth of theology there that is different from Roman Catholic theology. To me, that doesn't make us enemies. I know we're going to talk, I think, about difference and how we converse with each other, or can, should we have the courage to treat one another's neighbors in society.
And so we'll get into that in a second. So, it is really, and wondering, there's differences in all of us. There's differences in the way we work, but the differences in the things that we consume, the media consume, the people we surround ourselves with. And you've chosen to surround yourself and serve people of a certain faith. Did you grow up in this faith, or what was your childhood like?
No, I didn't. I was nowhere near a Lutheran church. In fact, I had no idea what a Lutheran church was. I was raised culturally Catholic, and then as we get into, about kind of my story as a prisoner, I was really adopted into and mentored and reared in Black church traditions, and I leave it to you to push us along the way. But you get a preacher on there like your uncle or me, and we can talk. So
so yeah, I'll interrupt you when necessary. So if I can get those words in, yeah. And if you put a politician and a doctor who wants to just continue to talk and teach and talk about what's going on, it's hard sometimes. So here we are, getting to one day you found yourself with a gun in your hand, and that led you to go to prison. Can you bring us to that day and
how
you got there and what happened?
Sure. Let me make a shameless plug though, and just thank you and your partner over there for the podcast stuff around different things going on in the area with the LifeWise Academy and stuff, because we're here. I live in Oldham County, and as a parent and a pastor, concerned about these things going on in the school system. So I know it's way off topic, but I've been really engaged with that, and I'll go right to your.
Well, before you say that, you're talking about Sarah Blessing, my co-founder, who's amazing. Yeah. Who's on vacation right now, actually, much needed vacation. And I've been picking up some of the slack in terms of posting on social media. That's her job. I really appreciate how much work she does in the background. So if anyone wants to thank her, please do. But she did a special episode, Get the Word Out, around this LifeWise Academy, which is really pushing in religion into schooling. And some of the things happening there, even some of the constitutionality of it. So if anyone wants to take a look at that. But here we're talking about something pretty pretty deep, pretty vulnerable. And so, yeah, please bring us to that day where you had a gun in your hand. Yeah.
So let me just say that I didn't really find myself with a gun in my hand. I had stolen a gun from my home in Colorado when I just shortly after I turned 16, and got a couple of friends of mine to travel from Denver to New York City, where my best friend lived. We were going to go party, and we were just done. I was just done with an angry young suburban kid. Some of that anger came from some things you and I talked about, being a survivor of multiple instances of childhood sexual assault. And I think I said to you too in a conversation, these things are always embarrassing to talk about. Not just being a victim of sexual assault, but someone I committed violent crimes, and I'll get on that in a minute. But in terms of embarrassment, I'm glad to always be embarrassed, because this story is certainly a witness to a number of different things, but also terrible, right? So let me just start by saying, there was no passive, at the age of 16, gun in my hand. I took a gun from my house and disappeared from home. Would later find out that my parents are looking for me. My sister, of course, is distraught at the age of 14. And my car broke down in New York. And my friends and I had decided to basically hijack a car. And so in the process of stealing a carjacking is what it's called now, I shot two men. I was 16. They were in their 20s. I didn't know them. We were just stealing their car. And we were caught that night. And so that started my what it meant to be locked up. So I pled guilty shortly after my 17th birthday. I had confessed to the crime. And at 17, I was in the state maximum security prison system in New York.
What a change in life overnight, of your life and someone else's life too. Do you know what happened to those people that you assaulted?
I do, yeah. They're those people are alive, and to my knowledge, other than physical and emotional scars, they're not permanently injured. To my knowledge, I've had people ask me if I've ever wanted to talk to them, and I said, that would be kind of like me if the two men and the woman who assaulted me sexually as a child showed up out of nowhere in my life. Like I forgive them and everything, but I don't want to talk to them, So
sure.
I think that's a bit selfish.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that way. But again, it's an embarrassing story. But at my sentencing hearing, I had pled guilty, so I knew what my sentence was. I did choose to write a letter as I could when I was still 16, trying to express some sense of remorse. And one of the men I shot stood up and said, "I hope that you're going to get out of prison someday, and I hope that you are able to change and do something better with your life." So I've never forgotten that, and I've never forgotten the names of the two men, which I will never repeat out loud, but I do say to myself from time to time. I probably should note that this was in 1993. So so some time ago.
A while ago. Okay. And so that is a moment of grace that you seem to remember almost word for word, or in that moment, how you felt, what it all looked like. I mean, there are moments in our life that make milestones, right? That just stand out, where you remember everything. And then there are whole months that we don't remember anything from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And so that must be a moment that you take with you, as you said, every day. You're sharing it with us. I mean, do you think about that moment often, or and has that moment when has that moment been important to you throughout your life?
Well, I think it gave me some spark of hope that all was not lost. So from age 6, I was locked up at 16, and I was released in April of my 30th, at the age of 30. So I had spent just over 14 years of my life, almost half of my life, in prison. And at that time, a person charged as an adult was put in the adult maximum security prison. So there wasn't a juvenile hall or division for youth. I was in prison with people who were 2 times or more my age at the age of 16, 17. So,
yeah. So now you're in maximum security prison. We've all seen movies of that first night in prison, where people are jeering and making you feel uncomfortable. It must be so scary to have that moment happen and that whole change of life happen. Can you tell us the reality of that? I mean, being someone who's never gone through that, and obviously Hollywood has their own take.
Yeah, so everyone's afraid in prison. Everyone, whether they've been there for decades or months or weeks, everyone's afraid in prison. There's an element of fear that's always running through, because we're a group of people who've committed crimes, right? Or had rough lives. So everyone's afraid. So there is what people would kind of think of as a hazing type of thing. In the language of the New York prisons, people are going to try you and test you, see where your boundaries are, that kind of thing. So I think what I would describe it as is living in a constant flight or fight response state, which is a whole nother conversation. So certainly, right, I was afraid. Everybody's afraid.
And does that fear dissipate at any point during your time there? How long were you in prison?
About 14 and a half years, all in maximum security.
Yeah. I just need to point out that you said about 14 and a half years. That's someone who is counting every moment. If they're saying,
well, I could tell you exactly, it was over 14 years.
Yeah. Okay. So again, does that fear ever dissipate, or does it stay at the same level of fight or flight? And again, part of this is I'm a doctor and explaining some of these things.
I hear it. I hear it coming out of you.
Right.
Diagnosing and processing.
Right. I mean, a state of constant having stimuli coming in, right, brings us into fight or flight. And we have 2 different types of brains in our body. We have a reptilian brain and a mammalian brain. We kind of grew the mammalian brain on top of the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain is responsible for making kind of choices quickly from stimuli without necessarily processing them. We don't actually call on the higher brain to do that. And so this leads to a lot of running from things or aggression one way or another. And so to be human means to cut that loop, that feedback loop, and try to use our higher brains. And so if you're in a constant state of fear, that reptilian brain is always firing, and it requires an incredible amount of work, concentration, dedication to cut that loop from causing you to do whatever you need to do to defend yourself. So with that in mind, does that resonate to you?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, there's the other piece, right, that the male brain doesn't fully develop until mid-20s, right?
Sure.
So you have a lot of young men and old men in the prison with rough backgrounds, and people from many different backgrounds, right? But over 80% African American and Latino, Afro-Latino, right? Population in the New York State prison system, which is still the same demographic today. So it's a very different cultural experience too. So, I mean, I from your perspective, processing that, right, about mammalian brain, reptilian brain, I mean, this makes sense from in a sense, an academic viewpoint, but feelings are also involved, right? Fear is a feeling, right? That taps into perhaps flight or fight response systems, despondency. So my simple answer to your question is that the fear never goes away, but it changes and adapts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I started to, instead of being afraid of an immediate situation, right? The old saying, familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
Become contemptuous of the environment. Who wouldn't?
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
locked in by yourself or with somebody else in a threatening environment, so on and so forth, right? And probably, I'll share some stories if you want about kind of pivotal moments.
Please bring us through, bring us there with you.
Yeah.
When things happened. Yeah.
So to move from conceptualizing it, right, in a, a modern scientific paradigm to real experience. Both are valid but different. So here's an example. You had asked me in another conversation we had about, like, because I'm a Christian now, right? And I am a pastor. I didn't, by the way, come out of prison and go to seminary and walk on water and think that I was going to do great things. That's not how my journey worked out. And I'm so glad it didn't. It's people coming out of prison, we don't know ourselves, especially going in as 16-year-old and coming out at 30. I had never seen. Now you think about what happened between, say, 1993 and 2007, right? Cell phone, internet. I had never seen the internet. I'd never seen a cell phone. I'd never sent a text message. I'd never been on the internet before.
That's incredible.
So, I mean, I mean, we can kind of put a pin in that for a second, but
yeah.
In terms of, there's a thing called jailhouse religion, jailhouse conversions, right? People come to prison, and because of your life is disrupted, right? I'm in chaos. I'm in a sense of human urgency, which I cannot explain or process. And the one thing that saved my life was that I was able to read. Okay. So people turn to the Bible or the Quran or other religious expressions to, in some way. And so I was no different in that regard. But I did not have a magical born again experience where some light or angel came down into the prison cell and anything. In fact, one major turning point for me was when I was still in the county jail and I was placed in solitary confinement because I was, fighting other prisoners. I was in solitary confinement for almost 6 months at the age of 16. And I remember, I don't mean to be graphic, but I was doing a number one, going potty. Okay. I'm a dad of 4 kids. So, I was going potty. Yeah. And in the jail, there's a stainless steel bolted on thing that's kind of like a mirror. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I said, well, you're, excuse my language. I said, well, my God, you're a piece of shit. That was a spiritual experience for me that, reflecting on that, was actually honest. So I had a number of pivotal moments like that. I think I can call them epiphanies comfortably without being overly esoteric. When I was 17 and I had just got to the Coxsackie prison, south of Albany, it was a place that they called Gladiator School. And I said, what is that? They said, well, you're gonna learn to fight, to cut and survive there. And I was talking to this guy, I'll never forget this, from Argentina. He was blonde hair, blue-eyed guy, didn't speak a lick of English, from Argentina. And we were speaking in Spanish. And the next morning, there's no hot water in the prison, so they let a guy out in the morning who's called a porter on the gallery or the cell block to put hot water in our little buckets. So we put a little towel on our cell door, and that indicates we want hot water. And then I heard him yell, "Help, help." And people don't call for the guards or the COs, officers. That doesn't happen. So it's very weird. And I looked out the corner crack of my cell, and the guy who I was talking to the night before from Argentina had hung himself that night in his cell. And that was my first, it was one of the first incredibly impactful and terrifying. I was like, oh my God, just talking to this guy. Situations like that, another one in the same 6-month period when I was 17, we came out of our cell into a paramilitary formation. Everybody has to line up by cell number, to go to the mess hall. And right next to me, an arm came swinging over with a razor blade and cut this guy's face open. And blood was everywhere. And that was where I was now living. So the fear turned from, gosh, what might happen to me, to I'm going to be here for a long time. What am I going to become? I wouldn't have thought that in those terms then, but that was happening. So,
right.
Yeah. So I ended. So I don't know if you have.
No, well, thank you for that. And thank you for such incredibly deep stories and vulnerable. What I'm hearing is a lot of suffering, and I'm also reflecting on your life today. I'm hearing is a lot of being surrounded by a lot of suffering, death, violence as well. And somehow you found yourself eventually taking care of the dying in prison, where suffering is obviously
intensified. It's amplified.
Intensified.
Yeah.
So how did you find yourself there from?
Yeah, that's a great segue. So I got, because I was literate and I could read, I learned how to type really fast. And so I wanted to be connected somehow to the chapel because it was a peaceful and good place to be. So I talked to a guy named Reverend Lucas, who's still part of my life today, believe it or not. He spoke at my ordination along with my pastor who founded the hospice program. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So I got down to the chapel and started typing up stuff for him and working for him, and was exposed to a type of Christian message that I had never been exposed to before. Some people might call it black theology or black. It's just good news about the possibility of what, for me as a Christian, Jesus Christ can do in my life, confronting guilt directly and straightforward with the possibility of something better. So, 7 years into my time, another chaplain came named Jay Lewis, is the pastor now at Calvary Presbyterian in Newburgh, New York, because I think he's been there about 20 years. And unbeknownst to me, none of these things matter to a prisoner typically, right? I'm trying to survive in a certain sense. At the same time, 7 years into my sentence, I'm no longer what they call a new jack. You know what I mean? People know me. I'm known to be intelligent. I was involved in the chapel and the Bible studies, worship stuff. I was known as what guys call one of the Christian brothers. Sometimes they just call us the brothers. So even in certain times, I was a leader in the Christian community. So gang members would sometimes say, we need to have a sit down in the yard, in the prison rec area, the yard. And I would talk to people about different groups that I don't want to name here. Why you all don't need to be stabbing, cutting each other, and trying to kill each other.
Sure.
Or certain Latin groups, gangs have codes that allow them to get out of gangs if they were to convert to Christianity. Believe it or not, it's in there. This is just way different than, by the way, suburban or urban white America. It's a very different environment. And they would ask me if I would vouch for somebody. So those are other stories. Along the way, Jay Lewis came in as the chaplain, and he, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know what this was then. He's a clinical supervisor with the Association for Clinical Pastoral Education. So if you did hospital rounds, you might have seen chaplains who were resident chaplains. So he was a supervisor at mental health institutions and other places. And he was tasked to create a hospice program for dying prisoners because there were a lot of prisoners dying with a large population of prisoners in prison. So they created medical units annexed to some of the maximum security prisons. And so we had a unit annex. So he came in and helped start this program and recruited some of us. And I worked for about 7 years with over 300 men or so who died in prison. I was with a number of men at the very moment they died. We were brought through again, I didn't know what this was then. I do now, having had other clinical training. We were brought through a clinical pastoral education program with one commitment that no one should die alone. No one. So we would often be in this cell with dying prisoners overnight when they were actively dying.
Yep.
Which means locked in there with them. They ain't go nowhere. That's right. It. It's you and that person, or in our case, me and that man. And he is dying. And I'm the last face he might see, the last voice he might hear, or the last presence he might feel. And that was, I say from my Christian faith that it was in those men, all of whose names I have written down in my journals from when I was in prison. I have every single name written down in a place that's sacred to me in my journals that I bring with me to every office that I go to. Okay. And
yeah,
no, jump in because I can really kind of talk about this.
I just want to relate if I can, which is, hard to say. How do you relate to such an extraordinary story that you're having, but you're getting into a place. So first of all, you've kept the name of every single person that you've been with as they've died. My background is as an emergency physician, treating a lot of people who die, who even come to you on the edge of death and die in front of you. And you're with them as they do. But not only that, my background is, it started a telemedicine technology and company before telemedicine was a thing, part of the people who invented it, and treated patients in nursing homes. And we had a palliative care program and hospice program, and spent a lot of time with dying people, both virtually and in person. And one of the things that I say on the campaign is I have this, I say it in various different ways because it's so deep to me. It comes out so similarly each time. It just means so much. And I think people connect to it because of that. But, that I've said a lot of broken bones as an emergency department doctor, but I've never said a Democratic broken bone. I've never said a Republican broken bone. I've never pulled a bullet, an independent bullet out of a child. I've never, treated a partisan neighbor. And so, and I've never held the hand of a Democratic dying person or Republican dying woman as they were scared they wouldn't make it through the night. And that idea of people are people, and at these moments of tragedy, at these moments of transcendence in some points, and when families come around the bedside, for me at least, you forget about a lot of the labels that you carry, the things that you are, and you relate on this very human to human level that has nothing to do with a lot of the noise outside of you. And so I wonder if you had also experienced that or not. Does this resonate at all of what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes. Let me give you an example. So I've said that many times that that's where I met Jesus. Right? Was in the faces and hands of those who were fellow prisoners who were dying. So there's a guy, I'll just say, use an initial K. Let's call him K. K was in prison for raping his own daughter, and in the prison, as in, well, I mean, I do question right now how much people want to protect children from pedophiles and predators, given our current political environment. I'll be very honest about my concerns about that in the highest offices in the land right now. But going back to this very intimate, terrible situation, I was tasked with caring for this man, and I'm a survivor of sexual assault. So I did my job and was present with him, but I was having a hard time inside. And so Jay Lewis, Reverend Lewis, in our group meetings, which we had weekly, and I was working as his clerk. He encouraged me to face myself, to keep things short in this situation. And it was through that experience and some other experiences with other sex offenders that I was able to find a place of forgiving those who harmed me. And in some strange way, my presence and the presence of the other prisoner volunteers extended some kind of grace to this guy who's a terrible human being. At the same time, I shot 2 men.
Yeah.
So, it's a hell, I say this intentionally, it's a hell of a thing to sit in judgment of others, especially thinking I'm a Christian, is when I judge, I put myself in the judge's seat and not in the seat of someone who, who has been charged and convicted metaphorically and literally as well. So those were absolutely transformative experiences. That's an incredibly intense one. I did some writing about it because his daughter, who was the victim of his crime, was his medical power of attorney and everything. And she was married to a person that I'll just say, let's call him Joe. I actually know his name. So it's Joe. And so Kay, the man I was caring for, started to call me Joe as he approached the end of life. And I was writing about this and reading a lot and talking and with Pastor Lewis, Reverend Lewis. I understand from a psychodynamic perspective, right? This is what we call transference and countertransference. But there's something else going on in the process. Instead of reality basing this guy, oh, I'm not Joe. I'm not Joe. Right? I'm not your son-in-law. I just sat in silence. There's something that I don't know that needs explanation, but there was something in that.
Yeah,
we call it a ministry of presence that was allowing him to work something out before he died, and certainly he did die 3 months later.
Sure,
that's a graphic example, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, this experience of the number one thing that's very hard for an emergency doctor is treating a lot of drunk drivers who've killed people, and the drunk driver survives. We see that more than you would like to admit. And how do you put aside a mistake or the evil of it or whatever your emotions are to be with them? I mean, there's also people who killed other people through guns and gun violence, and having to work with those people as well. And for me, as part of the Boston marathon bombings and terrorists who killed lots of people and hurt tons of people, and those terrorists came to our emergency department. So the emotions and the don't last just in that moment, right? They last for days, weeks, months, years, and really a lifetime afterwards of trying to make sense of what you did and how to communicate that. And I think you just communicated it beautifully. I want to just say this before we move on, is that I would like to invite you back and talk more.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you kindly, man.
But we have about 15 minutes right now.
Okay.
Moving into how you found yourself with the collar on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was doing writing. This was part of I've called his name several times, Reverend Lewis, J. Lewis, who again is still part of my life to this very day. Part of the expectation is we would be journaling, right, to help us process what we were experiencing and going through, and then process it together, process with him, so on and so forth. So there's a woman who owned a hospice company in Denver, back where I had left and went to New York. And she got a hold of some of my writing because my mother had ended up working for that company. So my mother had shared my story with her, and she said, well, I'm going to read some things that he's writing. So this woman started writing me, and she said, eventually she said, if they ever let you out of there, I'm going to hire you in my company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad to have somebody that, to write to that founded a hospice company and cares about, particularly she had a very deep love for marginalized and the very, very poorest of the poor in urban areas. Well, and that's what happened. She hired me 2 weeks after being released. Her and the director of nursing were saying, yep, well, we'd like you to start, next week. And I say, hey, I just spent over 14 years of my life in prison. Can you give me another 2 weeks, to relearn what it feels like to walk down the street?
Yeah.
But long story short, I ended up working for them. I ended up doing like bilingual admission work over the phone, and then marketing people were sick. So I went out to one of the local hospitals that dealt with Medicaid patients and the poor to do a presentation for 50 social workers. And they asked me to do this. I said, sure. I said, listen, I don't know all the ins and outs. I said, but I can talk about life and death and what it means to be with people and what hospice can be as a compassionate care, palliative compassionate care for people, honoring death as a part of life. I said, I could talk about that. I did. And we started getting all these phone calls from the hospital, the case managers, like, we want to work with that company, that group that Rich was part of.
Right.
And so I ended up doing marketing, and I later was recruited to some other companies. And I ended up getting recruited by a physician group in Longmont, Colorado. And I went over there, and part of my job was to help expand the market. And I supervised somebody who didn't want to work for me or with me because I had been in prison. That's something we haven't talked about, but I have met with some people who felt that I shouldn't be a pastor, or that I shouldn't be, or used my past when I was in marketing against me to try to tell other people, hey, don't do business with this guy or that company because he was in prison.
Sure.
Maybe you talk to me about that next time. But long story short, so I'm in this group, right, with an amazing guy, amazing doctor, Brian Mathwick. I don't think he'll mind me mentioning his name. Amazing guy, beautiful soul, and kind of like you, he's very innovative entrepreneur, created a bunch of different businesses in Colorado. And, he sold the company, which we knew was coming. And it was at that time he and I were talking. I was talking with my pastor and others. I say, I really feel like I'm going to go to seminary and I want to be a pastor and serve people. It was my faith in Jesus. And I don't say this from an evangelical kind of conservative viewpoint, but that allowed me along the way to find the grace to see myself in honesty, embarrassment, and truth, and guilt and shame, and see yet that there is a possibility for me as a prodigal son to, in the words of that parable of Jesus, to come to myself and discover what perhaps I could be. So I took that step of faith, married to my wife, 3 children at the time. And just before I was a couple months before I went to seminary, we had our 4th child, which has been the unexpected blessing of our lives. So I went to I left everything. My wife does medical device research in the private sector, so she has a really great career. And I worked in retail about 10 to 20 hours a week, going to seminary full time. In the first 2 years of our youngest son's life, I, with the help of my mom and of course my dad, was the stay-at-home parent when my wife went back to work. So that was the transition. So people sometimes ask me, well, how the heck were you in like business development and all this? Because I put it on my CV or my resume, right? If I'm interviewing for a job, and they were like, how did you make this? How did you go from that right to this? And I said, well, it's really a full circle, because I got started in the healthcare marketing stuff from being in prison, working with the dying and understanding very intimately what hospice can be. And so I hope that's a shorter version.
No, that's doable. I mean, I think you're saying one of the tenets of good business and products and services, which is to make something people want, which means you need to intimately understand the people that you're serving in order to work backwards from there and be able to message to those people and give people something that fulfills their life more. And, the rest of the business comes from that. And you certainly have those life experiences to bring to a business or an operation. And that is incredibly value to any person who's building something. So I think that doctor, that business person that you talked about, both probably understood that intimately and really wanted your experience and your heart as part of it, which makes a business more than a business, makes it a mission. And so you're now running and being a different organization.
Now it's a fully volunteer organization where, hey, so it struck me, right? You got your sign, Tim Peck for Congress, right? So what are the two things we don't talk about in society? Religion and politics, right?
Right.
And here I am,
and death.
Right. Here I am, right? And we're in a time, right? I think we're in an inflection point in this society that's incredibly surprising to some people, to other people, including the people that have reared me and mentored and trained me in faith, is not at all surprising.
Mm-hmm.
But how the question has remained very, very similar. How do we live, or how do we die together? Because if we don't learn to live together, to borrow Martin Luther King's phrase, if we don't learn to live together as brothers, we'll die as fools.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of foolishness happening. But it's still right. People might say, well, that's a pastor. That's very political. And I always try to say everything we do in faith or religion or society has a political inflection, because politics define how policies are developed. In other words, how we treat our neighbors is filtered through the political process of civic life in this society. And so if those of us of faith that I'll describe as having a horizontal instead of a vertical moral ideology or faith, don't speak forward about what's going on horizontally amongst our neighbors, then we're missing the whole point of someone like Jesus of Nazareth.
So again, let's meet again. I mean, I have 1,000 questions to go through, so I'm trying to pick one that is probing to talk about, to kind of preview what we might talk about in the future. So
sure.
How about this? There's a lot of evangelical churches that have politicians speak from the pulpit and invite them into the pulpit, mostly on the right where this happens. This happens somewhat on the left as well. How does that make you feel? Do you think that's appropriate? Or based on what you were just saying, that fits a little bit of the ideology that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. What is the place in society for that right now, especially?
Well, it's a matter of just principle. I don't have a problem with politicians coming into churches and speaking. I don't have a problem with pastors running for office or politicians being pastors, right? I mean, I don't think those things need to be opposed. Mm-hmm. I think for me, what's underneath the concern of that is the ideological framework that I was probably, for our time constraint, don't want to get into the concept or idea of a vertical versus a horizontal moral framework, right? But what I'm trying to get at is it's easy for dominant groups in society to say, or ruling groups to say, well, because we dominate or we have the resources and power, or in the 18th century and 17th centuries, the guns, that we're doing God's will, and the evidence of God's will is that we have successfully conquered or ruled, right? And we're doing that in the name of God. I'll just say this. I think that the parable of the Good Samaritan, if it's read thoroughly, people begin to understand what Jesus was really talking about when he said, when he was asked, what's the most important commandment? He says, love the Lord your God with all your being, in summary. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. How does a person love a God we cannot see? The only way to do that is to love the people made in God's image who we can see. And that person might be someone who doesn't believe the same, look the same, speak the same language, or born across a different kind of border. So that's a horizontal ethic rooted in the simplicity of perhaps Mr. Rogers' theme song. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Won't you be my neighbor?
Right.
The simplicity of that is a powerful challenge to structures of power, racism, and discrimination in our society, which are doing what that lawyer was trying to do in the parable of the Good Samaritan, that is to define the neighbor. And I've said this recently in another podcast and in an interview with a TV station. I said, neighborliness in that story of the Good Samaritan, right, which ends by saying, who was the neighbor? Jesus asks. And the lawyer says, the one who showed mercy. And he says to the lawyer, go and do the same thing then. So neighborliness is not a quality that we get to measure or judge in other people. But as Christian people, or myself as a Christian, neighborliness is actually the claim that other people have on my life for how I should be the neighbor. I don't get to define the neighbor. Neighborliness has a claim. Now that is a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which he learned that ethic. I would just mention it at Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem before he was arrested and executed by the Nazis in Germany. But so that's an ethical perspective that understands the connection between a faith in God and a love of neighbor. Those things aren't separate. When they are, then we have religion being used as a control mechanism because the arbiters, the interpreters, the mediators of God's message create a structure, a hierarchy. Who gets to say, well, this is what God's saying. And that language in our society looks like, well, the Bible clearly says, or we have a biblical worldview, which does not exist, by the way, unless you're good. It just does not exist. You're always negotiating with the Bible.
Yeah.
Picking and choosing and prioritizing what thing is right. And when you're doing it based upon your ethic, do you have an esoteric, immaterial ethic that says, I just imagine that God is on my side, looks like me, and has the same biases, prejudices, and desires that I have? Or is there a horizontal ethic as demonstrated in the incarnation of Jesus, which says, there in each neighbor of mine is the image of God, and I should never dare to violate that image, but in so doing, I violate myself. That's a pathway of redemption, and an ethic that, with my own story, I've been the prodigal son. I've been the neighbor on the side of the road. I've been the criminal. I've been the father welcoming the prodigal son. I've been the older brother judging. Anyway, you're getting into my preacher.
Well, no, I mean, it's
mindset.
And we'll do it again, and we'll get even deeper. But I think a good example of that, and I just want to bring it up, is that you have pub faith at your church.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you need to come sometime, man.
I was looking at the next pub faith. It's I think October 15th at Shipley's in Madison. And is everybody invited to that, or is that a
you come? Yeah. So it's now I tease the guys a little bit because I didn't go for a while, right? Just for my own reasons, and but I went back last month, and I had kind of said to myself, and I hope some folks from my church see this. I mean, we could put it on our church Facebook if you want to share it there, and I was saying to myself, right, there's a lot more pub than faith going on, right? But the more and more I thought about it, it really is so. It's so important. It is important for people of goodwill and folks with some different ideas and thoughts to come together. So it's not all just guys from our church, though it's organized by that. There's a few guys who I've never seen at a worship service, and we're there. They all know I'm the pastor, and I'm like, listen, if you're drinking or you're cussing or whatever, believe me, I've heard much worse, and I'm not judging you, but as pastor, I'm not going to sit and have my bourbon with you, because that's not my relationship to you.
Right.
But I'm glad to hang out and have a greasy hamburger.
Well, I love Shipley's, and just was recently there. My sister-in-law had her birthday, and we decided to do a music and pub crawl in Madison, and Shipley's is where we started to get with our greasy hamburgers and some Bud Lights. So recommend it. So if I would love to get there this next one you have scheduled, I have to work an overnight shift, but I am so grateful for you to be here and have been here. It is an extraordinary story, and one that we can all learn from. And I hope that next, and Ashley, one of the commenters on Facebook says, and milkshakes. So you don't want the Bud Lights. And the story can be something that we can all learn from, but more so grow from. And this idea of horizontal and taking a neighborly approach to our everyday, rather than stay within the vertical beliefs that we have and relate only to our bubbles, is a more important message than ever today. And that's part of what we're trying to do here at Project Next, is part of what we're trying to do, Tim Peck for Congress, is kind of break down these barriers and have ways that we can relate to one another. So thank you for exemplifying that. And would love to have you back.
Well, I'm glad to come back, and I hope that folks who had heard me or experienced me to be conscientious about my story in the good and particularly, most importantly, in the bad, that I approach with gratitude for where I am today with the help of other people. I've never done this alone. And it's from that place that when I'm speaking against things in our society, like as a pastor against racism and Christian nationalism, I'm speaking against those things because I'm for something better.
Yeah.
Like opposition for the sake of opposition is one thing, but I am for something better that doesn't have to be in line with being a Lutheran Christian or anything like that. But simple neighborliness is certainly something that people could dare to try. So
awesome. Well, thank you again. We will do this again, as I said. I appreciate you so much, Brother Priest Rich, Pastor Rich, excuse me, using the new language.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
And we'll do this again. Please like, share, subscribe. Thank you, everybody.